I never imagined that the day the FBI knocked on my door, I would already know my son-in-law was after my inheritance. What I did not know was that he might also have murdered the man I loved most. My name is Loretta Mae Washington, and this is the story of how a hidden fortune, a family wound, and a choice I never wanted to make pushed me to decide between my only daughter and my own survival. If stories of resilience and truth speak to you, stay with me until the end, and if it helps you the way it helped me, share this with someone who needs strength. The morning after I buried Thomas, the mirror showed a stranger, 63 years old, gray hair pulled tight to keep my hands busy, eyes ringed with a sleepless night, a mouth that forgot how to smile. I stood on the bath mat that still smelled faintly of the lavender soap he liked, and the steam from the shower curled around me like a veil. In my left hand, I held his death certificate printed in cold black letters. In my right hand, I held a lawyer's business card that felt heavier than paper has any right to feel. The irony was sharp. I could list my husband's favorite hymns and the way he folded the morning newspaper into perfect thirds, but in that moment, I understood I might not know him at all. Atlanta hummed outside our window with the sound of buses down Cascade Road and a neighbor's radio 2 houses over. The city has a way of carrying on, even when your world has been split open. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, sharp and urgent, and I took it off the burner as though answering a call I was not prepared to take. The smell of tea rose up with little swirls of steam, and for an instant I saw Thomas in his old house shoes padding in to kiss my cheek. He had a habit of putting his whole hand at the back of my head when he kissed me, like he needed to hold the memory in place. I stood for a long time at the window, watched a blue jay bully 2 sparrows off the feeder, and thought about how strange it is to live in a house that still holds another person's heat when that person is gone. People think grief is one thing. It is 100 things stacked into the same hour. You think of the first time you met, and then you notice a smear on the counter, and then you wonder how long the milk has been in the fridge, and then you remember the sound he made when he coughed the winter Shanice brought home the twins with a cold. Your mind will do anything to avoid the void. Mine worked double time, rummaging through 42 years at once. I saw Thomas at 20 when he argued with a professor about a history footnote. I saw him at 32 hammering a new shelf into our pantry because I said the canned goods needed proper order. I saw him at 50 standing in the church narthex talking too long to Deacon Rowland about budget overruns, and then apologizing to me because the cornbread was getting cold on the fellowship table. I saw him in the living room still and impossible as the oven timer counted down on a peach cobbler I never ate. 2 weeks passed in condolences and casserole dishes and the soft, relentless weight of sympathy. I dressed in black because it felt like the right thing to do, not because Thomas ever asked me to. He always liked me in color. He said I looked like a sunrise in yellow, but yellow felt like a lie that month. On a gray Tuesday, I tucked his rings into the top drawer of my vanity and drove downtown to an office with windows that made the skyline look like a postcard. Mr. Feldman's reception smelled like lemon polish and the kind of coffee they charge clients for without saying so. The carpet was thick enough to silence your doubts. He had wire-rimmed glasses and careful sentences. A man who had learned how to be the steady center of other people's storms. He shook my hand and guided me to a chair that swallowed me. Across the glossy table, he placed a manila envelope with my name written on it in the hand I knew from lists on the refrigerator and sticky notes tucked into my Bible. I stared at the loops of my name. He had always made the M in May too tall, like it was leaning forward to greet me. "Mrs. Washington," Mr. Feldman said gently, "your husband left instructions that this be delivered to you privately before any other business is discussed." I slid a finger under the flap and felt the paper-cut hope gives you. The first page was a letter. "My dearest Loretta," it began in that deliberate script. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and it is time you knew the truth." He wrote about secrets like they were medicine with a bitter taste. He wrote about watching his mother stretch $1 into a week and watching his father pour it into a bottle anyway. He wrote about promises made to himself as a boy in a house that smelled like despair and tobacco. He wrote about fear, not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that makes you plan. He told me the weekend computer repair jobs were not repair at all, but consulting work he built one client at a time. He told me some of those teacher workshops were real, but others were business trips in cheap suits to hotels with carpets that tried too hard. He told me how he learned to read a balance sheet the way he read his students' essays, underlining weak logic, circling errors, adding up what it could become with a little discipline. He told me he had bought 3 rental properties when the market had a fever and people said he was crazy to buy in neighborhoods that were not yet fashionable. He told me he had acquired a small slice of a lakeside parcel in North Georgia that had grown into a jewel. He told me he had done it slowly, quietly, meticulously. He told me he had done it for me. I could hear his voice between the lines. Loretta, I know you. You would have given half of it away the minute we saw a need. You would have used it to fix the church roof, to pay Sister Hattie's medical bills, to send scholarship money to a child you had only met once. Your heart is bigger than any account I could open, and your conscience is louder than any interest that might accrue. I wanted you to have more than a rainy day. I wanted you to have a climate all your own, where storms could not touch you. Forgive me for the secrecy. I gambled that anger is lighter to carry than hunger. The envelope contained statements and deeds and a list of accounts I had never heard of. I felt 2 things at once: hope, clean and frightening; betrayal, thick as oil. Mr. Feldman gave me space to read and space to grieve a second time for a new kind of loss. It is one thing to bury a husband. It is another to learn he had a life you were not invited into. It is a third thing to realize he built that hidden life for you and set it at your feet like a sacrifice. I asked questions that had no easy answers. Why did he not trust me with the truth? Why did he leave me to carry it alone? Mr. Feldman spoke of intentions and protection, and the way love sometimes disguises itself as control. He reminded me that everything in those folders was clean. Taxes paid, titles clear. He reminded me it was all mine by design, not accident. He said my husband had left very careful instructions about timing and privacy. He said I should decide how and when to tell my family. On the elevator down, a couple laughed about lunch plans. I looked at their bent heads and thought how easy it is to believe life is simple when you are between floors and your feet do not touch the ground. In the parking garage, my steps echoed. I sat in the car without turning the key and let the silence press against my chest until my heartbeat slowed. When I finally pulled out, I drove the long way home, past the park where Thomas used to run before his knee started complaining, past the high school where he taught senior civics and learned the names of kids whose parents never came to conferences, past the church where he once stood behind a folding table on a rainy Saturday and handed out bags of collards and rice to strangers who became neighbors. At a red light, I remembered the first time Thomas saw me paint. We were newly married and broke, and I had set up an easel on the back porch because the light was good and the landlord would not complain about the smell of turpentine outdoors. He stood there with his hand on his hip, studying the canvas like a puzzle. Finally he said, "You see things I miss, Loretta. You see the color under the color." I laughed and told him that is all painting is, learning to notice the layer the world pretends not to have. He kissed my forehead and said, "One day I will build you a studio with big windows." I said, "One day you will have time to sit in it and do nothing," and we both pretended those days were guaranteed. The house felt different when I unlocked the door. Grief rearranges furniture in the night, even when no chair has moved. The air had a taste to it, like the moment before a storm breaks. I found Shanice in the kitchen. The light from the window fell over her hair and made her look younger than she is. She was making stacks out of Thomas's papers, careful and tidy. She looked up, and relief crossed her face like a shallow wave. "Mama, you scared me. You did not pick up. I was about to drive around and find you." "I was at the lawyer's," I said, without explaining more. She nodded like she understood everything. That was always Shanice's way. She liked to solve. Even as a child, she would take apart a problem like a puzzle and line the pieces on the floor in a neat grid. Sometimes she would force a piece that did not fit because the grid mattered to her more than the picture. She reached for my purse to set it on the table, and I pulled it closer without meaning to. Her eyes followed the envelope in my arm and lingered with a curiosity she tried to swallow. "I am sorting Daddy's benefits and the pension papers," she said. "It is a lot, but Marcus can help us make sense of it. He knows all the terms I pretend to know." There is a tone children learn when they become adults and forget that their parents know the sound of a lie. It is not always a lie about facts. Sometimes it is a lie about tone, about motive, about how still a person can make their face when they want something they should not want. I watched my daughter, and searched her eyes for the little girl who once fell asleep in the pew with her head in my lap on hot Sundays in August. I found her for a second and lost her again to the woman standing in my kitchen, speaking with confidence she had not earned. "What is in the envelope, Mama?" she asked, and I felt my heart choose caution. "Nothing for today," I said. "I am tired." She touched my elbow and then pulled her hand back like she hit a hot stove. "Marcus thinks it might be better if you come stay with us for a while, just until you get your bearings. The house is so full of memories. It can be heavy. Buckhead is quiet. The kids would love to have you there." Buckhead is quiet in a way that keeps mothers like me from breathing right. I smiled without showing teeth and told her I wanted my own bed and my own creaking floors and my own kettle that whistles at the wrong time. She pressed again, and something inside me stiffened. I kissed her cheek and thanked her for sorting papers and asked her to lock the door behind her. When the house was still, I took the envelope to Thomas's study. It is barely a room. We called it a study, but it is a pantry with a window a person could dream through. Thomas kept his lesson plan binders there and a mug full of pens that wrote only in black. "Dust gathers in grief." I wiped the desk with the sleeve of my sweater and pulled open the bottom drawer for no reason other than habit. It caught and rattled, and the sound told a story I had not known to ask for. There was a false bottom. I lifted it, and my name rose up at me from a smaller envelope. He had written something under my name, "If they come looking." I opened it with the shaky care of a person diffusing something that could blow her life apart. "Loretta, if you are reading this, then someone is already pressing you about the money. Money changes people, especially people who love you when they think you have none. Trust your instincts. Trust Mr. Feldman if you must. Trust very few beyond that. There is a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box 847. The key is taped inside your mother's Bible." I went to our closet and reached for the Bible out of muscle memory. The leather was dry from years of hands and Sundays. My mother had tucked bulletins between certain pages to remember sermons that comforted her. When I opened the front cover, the little silver key winked up at me like a dare. I closed my eyes and pressed the book to my chest. The house creaked an answer I could not understand. My phone rang in my pocket and made me flinch. Shanice again. I let it go to voicemail and then picked up the second call because a mother will always pick up the second call. Her voice was soft and strained. She said Marcus thought he could help, that financial decisions can be overwhelming, that grief is a thief of judgment. I told her I was fine. She asked where I was going. I told her I had an errand. She asked if she should come. I told her no. I hung up before she could make me doubt myself. The bank manager, Patricia, is the kind of woman you want around a table when things fall apart. She knew Thomas from church circles and old fundraising committees. She took one look at my face and moved me to a private room. No questions, just a small nod and the rattle of a metal box placed on the table like a casket without a lid. The fluorescent light buzzed. The clock on the wall ticked with more authority than time deserves. Inside the box were folders labeled with neat dates and heavier stories. One envelope held color copies of emails and a short memo written in Thomas's precise hand. Another held a flash drive taped to a note that said, "For your eyes," and then "For the right eyes if needed." The top page was a letter dated 3 months before he died. "Loretta, by now you know about the money. What you do not know is that Shanice and Marcus asked me for $500,000 for his new venture. I refused, not because I did not have it, because I looked and saw what he does with other people's money. Failed ventures. Investors hurt. I did not tell Shanice because I could not decide what would hurt her less, the truth now or the truth later. Marcus will come to you through her. He will use her love as a crowbar on your conscience. He will try to make urgency your enemy. I am leaving this here because I trust you to do the hard thing. Protect yourself. Protect our grandchildren. Protect her from herself, if you must." I sat alone and read every page until the words blurred. I plugged the flash drive into the little bank computer and watched short videos Thomas had recorded sitting at this very desk at home. He looked tired but certain. He narrated what he had found, explained how he documented it, laid out names and dates and why each detail mattered. He spoke like he taught, with the patience of a man who believed in people's ability to learn if given dignity. My cheeks were wet when I closed the box. Patricia knocked lightly and asked if I needed anything. I told her I needed the kind of courage you can put in a purse. She smiled and said, "Courage does not like purses. It likes pockets and quick hands. She walked me out with a hug that smelled like powder and peppermint. In the parking lot, the sky was the color of an old bruise, and the air carried the promise of rain. I turned my phone back on and felt it shiver with life. 17 missed calls, 14 from Shanice, 3 from Marcus. A voicemail from Mr. Feldman saying my son-in-law had called his office repeatedly, pressing for details as if death grants him a key to every locked drawer. It made my mouth taste like metal. On the drive home, I took the long way again. I drove through streets Thomas and I had walked in small steps after dinner when his knees hurt. I passed the barber shop where he always said he would get an old man cut and then never did. I passed Mrs. Campbell's porch where we bought okra in paper bags in summer. I passed the elementary school where Shanice had once marched in a costume made of poster board and string as the letter SS for sunshine. She had told anyone who would listen. My thoughts tried to build a bridge between the little girl in a paper S and the woman who married a man with a talent for charm. The first time Marcus came to dinner, he brought a bouquet too large for my vases and hands too smooth for the work he claimed to do. He complimented everything. My roast chicken, Thomas's cufflinks, the house itself, in a way that sounded like valuation, not affection. After they left that night, Thomas shrugged and said, "I hope he is what he seems." I told him I hoped the same and prayed what mothers pray when their children bring home strangers. Let love be kind to my child. If it cannot be kind, let it be quick. I did not know then that love can be cruel in slow motion. There were signs I tucked away into drawers because I wanted holidays to pass without fights. There was the Christmas he insisted on handling the family investment club's contributions and then lost the spreadsheet and blamed an app. There was the spring he nudged Shanice to ask us for a small loan, and when we said no, he sulked like a boy without a ball. There was the time he cornered Thomas on the porch to ask how much equity we had and how we had structured our will. I came out with lemonade, and the conversation changed shape as soon as they heard the door open. That is the thing about hindsight. It gives you 20/20 vision for scenes you did not want to watch. When I pulled onto our street, the light had shifted. The oaks put longer shadows on the asphalt, and a wind picked up that made the flag on Mr. Reese's porch snap like a scold. I parked 2 houses down and watched my own front door for a minute as if it could answer my questions. Who am I if the story I lived inside was only one chapter of a longer book I did not know I was reading? Who am I if my husband loved me enough to keep me safe and hurt me with that very same love? Who am I if I must decide how much truth my daughter can bear and still come home for Sunday dinner? Inside, the house met me with its familiar groans. I put the kettle on again because the body needs rituals when the mind is tired. I took the envelope and the flash drive to Thomas's study and stacked them on the desk in order of urgency. I wrote myself a list on a yellow pad because I know what panic does to a brain. Call Feldman in the morning. Open new bank box in my name only. Change the locks. Freeze credit. Find the key to the alarm system that Thomas insisted we did not need because he said the neighborhood was still ours. Grief had been a tide until that day. It came and went. It let me breathe on certain hours and drowned me on others. Now it became a current with a direction. Anger is a kind of oxygen if you do not let it become your only air. I walked the rooms, touching objects I loved and objects that had never meant much, telling them silently that I would not let a man with a smile like a salesman take one thing from this house that was not his. On the dining room buffet, my mother's hand-me-down crystal reflected a smear of sunset. In the hallway, the family photos built a timeline that made my knees weak. Shanice at 5 with a missing tooth, Thomas with chalk on his sleeve. Me with a smudge of paint on my cheek I had not noticed the day the picture was taken. I took the frames down and stacked them on the floor because I did not want faces on the wall watching what might come next. Night fell fast. Atlanta does that in summer. It holds on to light like a child holding a cookie and then drops it suddenly without apology. I closed the blinds and turned on the lamp by the couch. The shade throws a warm circle on the rug that Thomas liked to call cozy, as if cozy could be conjured by wattage alone. I checked the deadbolt and then checked it again. I am not a woman given to fear in my own home, but fear is a cousin to wisdom. The phone lit up with Shanice's name. I did not answer. It lit up with Marcus's name, and I watched it ring until it stopped. A text came through. "Let me help you make sense of this," it read. "You do not have to do this alone." I put the phone face down and let the silence sit with me. When I finally picked it up again, there was a voicemail from Mr. Feldman saying he would be in early and could meet me first thing if I wanted. There were 2 messages from the church secretary reminding me gently to send the obituary photo for Sunday's bulletin. There was one message from a number I did not recognize, a man's voice too bright, asking if I had considered counseling services for grief and estate transition. People smell opportunity, and not all of them mean you well. I deleted it and put the phone back down. I tried to sleep and failed. The house breathed around me. Pipes softened. The refrigerator clicked on and off like a metronome for a sad song. Around midnight, I got up and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The tile was cool and reminded me that the earth below us does not care about our dramas. I poured water and leaned on the counter. Through the slat of the blind, I could see the street, empty and ordinary. Headlights slid across the far wall. An engine idled. A black car eased up to the curb and stopped one house down. I watched without moving. The driver's door opened. A tall figure stepped out and straightened his jacket with the little tug men do when they want to look like they belong. He stood for a long beat under the streetlight, letting the light find his best angles. Then he walked toward my porch with a confident stride I knew too well. I turned off the kitchen light and stood very still. The doorbell did not ring. He knocked. 3 even knocks like a metronome deciding the tempo. Then his voice came through the wood, smooth as polished stone. "Loretta, it is Marcus. Shanice is worried sick. I thought I would come by to check on you personally." I set my glass down and felt something inside me settle the way a foundation settles. Not a collapse, a decision. I glanced at Thomas's study and the small pile of truth he had left me. I looked at the door I had just locked twice. I took a breath and walked toward the porch, each step measured, each inhale a promise I made to myself. I put my hand on the knob and paused. I did not open it. Not yet. Through the wood and the thin pane of glass, I could see the shape of him. Hands open, smile ready, teeth white as a billboard. He leaned close as if the door were an old friend who just needed to hear him out. He said, "Let me in, Mom. Family helps family." In the living room, the lamp cast that warm circle on the rug. In the study, the flash drive waited like a loaded truth. In my chest, my heart picked a steady beat that sounded more like courage than fear. I spoke through the door without raising my voice. "It is late, Marcus. Come back tomorrow." There was a silence and then a chuckle smoothed by years of practice. "Tomorrow might be too late for some decisions, Loretta. These things move quickly. I can protect you from mistakes if you let me." I tasted metal again, not fear, resolve. I lifted my chin and said, "Good night, Marcus." His shadow shifted on the porch. Another knock, this time softer, as if he thought delicacy would stroke the lock open. I repeated myself with the kind of calm that makes people listen. "Good night." He stood there a moment longer, and then stepped back. I listened to his footsteps on the planks, counted them, because counting can keep your mind from doing anything else. The engine started. The headlights slid across the wall one more time. The car pulled away slowly like a promise that had not given up. I locked the deadbolt a 3rd time and stood with my forehead against the door for a breath that filled me from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. In the study, I picked up a pen and wrote one more line on my yellow pad. "Do not open the door to danger that smiles." Then I turned off the lamp and let the house hold me like it had on better nights. I lay in bed staring at the dark and thought about seeds. Thomas's orchids sitting quiet in the corner of the enclosed porch had once been nothing but promise and patience. Beautiful things grow in shadow before they bloom in light. I told myself I would learn to be that kind of patient. I told myself morning would come. The house breathed. My chest matched it. Somewhere outside, a train spoke to the night. I closed my eyes with a plan forming in the quiet part of me that does not panic. When the sun finally reached across the blinds, I had not slept. I did not feel fragile. I felt like a person who had decided what kind of day she would have. The kettle sang, the toast popped, the same ordinary chores tuned themselves into a drumbeat. I showered and tied my hair back with a scarf Thomas liked. I put on the blue blouse he said made my eyes look like someone had turned the sky up a notch. I slipped the flash drive into a small pocket in my purse and slid the manila envelope beside it. I tucked my mother's Bible under my arm, not for the key this time, but for the courage that lay between its thin pages. The phone buzzed again and again on the table. I let it. Some things do not deserve the first hour of your morning. I locked the door and stepped onto the porch, and the air smelled like cut grass and the promise of heat. Across the street, Mrs. Palmer waved with the hand that holds her cane. I waved back and walked to my car. As I opened the door, a feeling settled into my bones so completely that I said it out loud, just to hear it. I will not be prey. I will not be hurried. I will not be the softest place for other people's hard choices to land. I will carry love and truth at the same time, even if it makes my arms ache. I drove toward Mr. Feldman's office with both hands on the wheel and my eyes steady on the road. The city opened in front of me, morning workers moving like schools of fish down sidewalks, buses sighing at stops, sun sliding up the sides of buildings. I thought of Thomas's last letter and how words can be a bridge when a body cannot be. I thought of Shanice's voice on the phone and how love can be misused the same way a knife can be used to butter bread or cut a person. I thought of Marcus's smile in my doorway and how some men learn to make false safety look like a gift. At a red light, I whispered to Thomas like a habit I had not broken yet. You should have trusted me with the truth while you were alive. Then, because love makes room for contradiction, I added, thank you for trusting me with it now. The light turned green. I pressed the pedal. The car went forward. The city made space for me. By the time I turned into the familiar garage, the sun had cleared the building tops. I parked and checked my face in the mirror. The woman looking back at me did not look like a stranger. She looked like a person who had pulled thread through the first hard stitch of a long repair. I reached for the manila envelope and the Bible and the purse with the flash drive, and for the first time since Thomas died, I felt something at the edge of fear that had a different name. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the floor where the glossy table waited. Somewhere between floors, my phone buzzed again with a text I did not read. When the doors opened, Mr. Feldman was already standing in the hallway with his door open and a look on his face that said he had cleared the next hour for truth. I walked toward him and toward the choice I had been avoiding for years without knowing it. Behind me, miles away, down a quiet residential street, a black Mercedes rolled to the curb again and idled before driving on. Ahead of me, on a table polished to a shine, a stack of papers and a legal pad waited for the kind of woman who writes lists and then checks them off. I took my seat and set the envelope down. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. My heart was steady in a way that felt like prayer. I said, here is what my husband built. Here is what he hid for me. Here is who is already trying to take it. Tell me what I need to do to protect what is mine and protect the people I love, even if they do not know they need protecting. Mr. Feldman nodded once as if to say, now we begin. He reached for his pen. I reached for mine. I did not know yet that by nightfall I would be tested again, that lines would be drawn, that the next knock on my door would not be a man with a smile, but 2 agents with badges. I only knew that a current had turned, that I had chosen to swim with it, and that every breath I took from here forward would be mine. The morning after meeting Mr. Feldman again, I walked out of his office with a list longer than any grocery list I had ever written in my life. Freeze assets, change locks, secure passwords, draft restraining order if necessary. He spoke in calm professional tones, but every line on that paper screamed danger in a language I understood too well. Danger that wore family clothes. Danger that knocked with polite knuckles. Danger that smiled when it said your name. When I got back home, the house no longer felt like the same house where Thomas had read the paper in his chair every Saturday morning. It felt like a stage where every shadow might be an intruder. I checked the locks 3 times. I unplugged the landline because the ringing startled me too much. I turned the TV on for noise and then turned it off because the noise made me feel like someone was watching. Fear is not logical. It does not follow rules. It climbs into your bed and pretends to be the sheet that keeps you warm. But I reminded myself of what I had said the day before. I will not be prey. By noon, my phone had rung 31 times. Shanice left voicemails that moved from sweet to sharp, her voice shifting like a singer hitting all the wrong notes. Mama, please, we need to talk. Mama, you can't just shut me out. And then finally, if you think hiding money is going to keep Marcus from protecting this family, you're wrong. Protecting this family. That was her phrase. I pressed delete before I could hear more. That night, The first real threat arrived. Not a knock this time. A message slipped under my door on a plain sheet of paper. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "You're old. You're alone. Let us help you before you lose everything." No signature, no phone number, just menace wrapped in civility. I held it with the tips of my fingers like it might burn me. I thought of Thomas, how he must have feared this moment enough to prepare a flash drive and documents. My husband had seen it coming, and now, here it was at my feet. The next morning, I drove to the FBI field office. Walking into that building felt like stepping into another world. Metal detectors, security lines, agents with eyes like hawks and shoes that did not squeak. I told the receptionist I had information about financial fraud, and soon 2 men in suits escorted me to a windowless room with a table and a tape recorder. Special Agent Cooper was lean, clean-shaven, all efficiency. Agent Ramirez was softer around the edges, with eyes that told me he had sat across from too many people, carrying too many secrets. They asked me to tell my story. I handed them the flash drive. As the files loaded on their laptop, I watched their faces. One leaned forward. The other wrote furiously. When the first video clip played, Thomas's voice filled the room. Calm, patient, precise. He listed Marcus's failed businesses, the investors who had lost money, the patterns of deceit. He had even captured screenshots of emails Marcus sent promising returns that never came. The agents looked at each other. Ramirez said, "Mrs. Washington, this is substantial. It's not just incompetence. It looks like deliberate fraud." Cooper added, "And if he's already pressing you, it may escalate. We need you to be cautious." Cautious. The word tasted like dust. I asked what that meant for my daughter. I asked what that meant for my grandchildren. They said, "We can't predict his moves, but we can prepare." They asked if I'd be willing to wear a wire if Marcus tried to pressure me directly. My chest tightened, but I heard my own voice say, "Yes," because courage is not the absence of fear. It is fear harnessed to purpose. That evening, I sat in my living room waiting for a knock I knew would come, and it did. Marcus stood at my door again, smile sharp, cologne heavy, charm rehearsed. He carried a bottle of wine like peace could be poured. "Loretta, we're family," he said. "Let's talk inside." I let him in this time, because Agent Cooper had wired me under my blouse, the small microphone pressing against my skin like a secret heartbeat. He sat across from me, crossed his legs, leaned back like he owned my furniture. "You're sitting on a mountain you can't climb, Mama. Let us help you. Shanice is worried. The kids are growing. College will come faster than you think. $500,000 now could set everything straight." His words flowed like honey, but underneath I could hear the buzz of wasps. I asked him questions the way the agents had told me to. "What would you do with that money, Marcus? Who else would be involved?" His answers were smooth, but not smooth enough. The microphone caught every syllable, every promise, every lie. Then his tone shifted. He leaned forward, dropped his voice, eyes narrowing. "Loretta, if you don't work with me, things could get messy. You don't want messy. Not with Shanice, not with the grandkids." My hands went cold, but my voice stayed steady. "Are you threatening me, Marcus?" He smiled. "I'm advising you." My heart pounded so loud I thought the microphone might pick it up louder than his words. I ended the conversation with grace, offered him pie I didn't have, and saw him to the door. When it closed, I leaned against it and whispered to the empty house, "I've got you now." The next day, the agents collected the recording. They looked at each other again, the same look as before, but heavier. Cooper said, "This is enough to pursue fraud charges, but there's something else." He mentioned messy. That could mean intimidation. "We'll monitor closely. Stay alert." I nodded. I thought I understood the danger. I didn't. Not yet. Because 2 nights later, I received a message that made my blood run cold. A text, no name attached, just words. "Accidents happen, especially to children who walk home from school." My legs gave out under me. I slid to the floor clutching the phone. Shanice's twins, my grandchildren. I called the FBI immediately, my voice breaking as I read the message aloud. Ramirez said, "Mrs. Washington, this is a direct threat. We're escalating." Escalating. Another word that tasted like metal. The agents moved quickly. They put patrol cars near the school, undercover men near Shanice's house. They asked if I could lure Marcus into another conversation, one where his threats became undeniable. My stomach turned, but I said yes, because no woman should have to choose between silence and her grandchildren's safety. And yet here I was, forced to choose exactly that. I invited Shanice and Marcus for dinner. Shanice sounded relieved, like maybe a bridge was being built again. Marcus sounded triumphant, like a man who thought the battlefield was already his. I cooked pot roast and cornbread, the kind of meal that says family even when family is fractured. I set the table with china we hadn't used in years. I told myself the performance mattered. When they arrived, Marcus's eyes swept the room, assessing, cataloging. Shanice hugged me too tight, her perfume cloying, her smile brittle. We ate. We made small talk. The kids chased each other down the hallway until I sent them to the den with a movie. Marcus finally leaned back, wiped his mouth and said, "So, Loretta, let's stop pretending. You can't hold this fortune alone. It'll destroy you. Hand it over, let us manage it, and everyone wins." My chest burned, but I looked him straight in the eye and said, "And if I don't?" He set his fork down with deliberate care, leaned forward and whispered, "Then maybe your grandkids won't always be so safe." Shanice gasped, "Marcus!" But she didn't deny it. She didn't stop him. And in that silence, my heart broke a second time. I felt the microphone warm against my skin, recording every word. I swallowed my tears, smiled like a woman who had lost, and said softly, "I'll think about it." When they left, the agents were waiting outside, unmarked cars down the street. They had everything they needed, or so I thought. But as I washed the dishes, I noticed something strange. A scratch on the window frame near the back door, fresh wood exposed like a wound. Someone had tried to force entry. Not just pressure, not just threats. Action. The war had crossed into my walls. And that's when I realized Thomas had been right all along. It wasn't just about protecting money. It was about surviving the storm he had seen coming years before. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold and then colder, listening to the house breathe and the refrigerator click and the shadows shift like they were deciding what they believed about me. The scratch on the back window frame kept flashing in my mind, a thin, bright wound on wood that had held us for decades. I walked to the door and ran my finger over that raw line, and in that simple touch, I understood the shape of the fight I was in. This was not persuasion. This was not negotiation. This was forced entry into a life someone believed they had a right to break. At 8, the next morning, I was back at the FBI office with Agents Cooper and Ramirez, and a woman I had not met before, Agent Lisa Park, who took notes with a speed that told me she did not miss much. They listened to the new recording, and quiet settled over the table when Marcus's whisper filled the room. "Then maybe your grandkids will not always be so safe." Park looked up first. "That is extortion alongside the fraud," she said, voice steady. "It is also a direct threat to minors." Cooper's jaw worked. Ramirez tapped his pen against his notebook like a drummer finding the beat of justice. Park turned to me. "We are going to move." Moving meant subpoenas and warrants and phone calls to people who do not answer on the first ring unless the law is calling. It meant unmarked cars where you do not expect them, and plainclothes men who look like neighbors until the moment they do not. It meant asking me to step aside as a widow and step forward as a witness. I nodded because whatever eyes I had closed to keep my daughter safe had been pried open by a knife on a window frame and a whisper over pot roast. They asked me for one more thing. "We need Shanice," Agent Park said, not unkindly. "We need her on the side of the truth, not on the fence. If she continues to speak for him, she becomes part of his plan, whether she understands it or not." I felt the old ache rise, the one that says a mother's job is to shield her children from the rain, even when the rain is their own making. But I had learned a harder job, to let the storm pelt and to stand beside without becoming an umbrella for wrong. "I can talk to her," I said, "but I cannot promise what she will choose." I drove to Shanice's house and parked across the street because I wanted to see it before I went inside. The lawn was still perfect. The porch still had the exact 2 ferns that never browned because someone came twice a week to make sure of it. Perfection is a costume. The real life was inside, where boxes waited with their mouths open and tape guns lay ready to close them. I let myself in with the key she had given me years ago for emergencies and times when a mother deserves to come and go without ceremony. She was in the kitchen with her back to me, hands flat on the counter, shoulders lifted as if she were bracing for a wave. When she turned, her eyes were swollen from a night that had not been kind. "I cannot do this," she said before I could speak. "I cannot live like this anymore. The phone keeps ringing with questions from numbers I do not know. People ask about investments I never heard of. The kids ask why we have boxes, and I say adventure like a liar. And Marcus keeps saying, we will leave by the end of the week, as if I should pack my life into cardboard and call it faith." "Do you love him?" I asked, not because I did not know, but because love changes shape when light touches it. "I loved who I thought he was," she said. "I do not know what to call this." I took a breath and told her about the recordings. I told her about the threats captured in clean audio. I told her about the knife at my window and the message about the children. She went still in a way that told me a wire inside had snapped. Then she folded, shoulders shaking, and slid down the cabinet to the tile. I sat beside her and rubbed small circles on her back the way I did when she was a child, and summer fevers took her appetite. "He is going to be arrested," I said quietly, "and there will be more. There will be questions you do not want to answer and questions you must. I will sit with you for both kinds." She nodded into her hands. After a long time, she wiped her face and stared at the floor. "I need to tell you something. 3 weeks before Daddy died, Marcus brought a glass jar of tea to the house. He said a client had given him some natural heart tonics, and he thought Daddy would enjoy it. He added honey and told me to take it in on a tray. I did. They watched a game together and laughed and finished the pot. He kept bringing it the week after. I did not notice anything, except that Daddy slept more. The floor tilted. The kitchen tile felt like ice. Why did you not tell me this? My voice was steady only because a different voice inside me was screaming. Because I did not think it mattered. Because I thought it was kindness. Because I did not know what I know now. She put her hand on my arm. Mama, I think Daddy was making his choices. He was strong. But I am telling you now because secrets do not protect us. They devour us. I stood and took her keys and drove her to the FBI building like a woman delivering a child to a hospital because an operation had to happen now or there would be no saving anything. Agent Park met us with a face that had compassion and purpose braided together. She led Shanice to an interview room and closed the door. Hours passed. I stared at a wall art print of a mountain and understood that someone had once decided this image would calm people. It did not. Mountains are beautiful and terrible. The air is thin there and the drop is long. When the door finally opened, Shanice walked out with a face that had shed something. It was not peace. It was not relief. It was the look of a person who has surrendered to truth and knows that truth will not hold her hand gently, but will not let her fall either. Agent Park said, "Thank you," to my daughter. Then she turned to me. "There is something else. We want to request an exhumation of your husband's body." The words entered the room like cold air. Park continued. Emails between Marcus and a partner reference, handling the Thomas problem and making it look natural. We need toxicology not done at the time. We need to know. I signed the papers with a hand that shook once and then steadied. At home that night, I opened the box where I had saved the funeral cards people left on the kitchen counter, and I read a few until the words blurred together. Rest in peace. Rest in power. Rest knowing you loved and were loved. I put them back and understood that peace does not come on schedule. It arrives when it chooses. The exhumation happened before dawn because the living must be spared certain images. I did not go. I sat on the porch and watched the sky change color in small degrees and talked to Thomas in the way I had learned to do. If there is anything I do not know yet, I will know it soon, I said. Help me hold it without breaking. The wind answered by moving the oak leaves and making them clap for no audience. 2 weeks later, Agent Park called. "Can you come down?" she asked. "It is better in person." Better is not the word any woman wants paired with the death of her husband. I sat in the same room with the same table and the same recorder and felt a different weight. Park's eyes were kind and sharp. "Your husband's blood and tissue show elevated levels of a cardiac glycoside consistent with digitalis derivatives," she said, slow enough for my brain to parse the science. In the levels found, the effect would mimic a heart attack and would be easy to miss without suspicion. Agent Cooper added, "We have corroborating emails suggesting procurement. We are preparing charges." I could not breathe for a moment. Then air found me. It did not taste like relief. It tasted like iron and grief forged into something harder than tears. "So he was murdered," I said, and the word sat in the air like it belonged there and had been waiting for us to say its name. Park nodded. "We will arrest Marcus on homicide in addition to the fraud charges. His partner is cooperating. The district attorney believes the case is strong." The arrest happened fast and slow. Fast for Marcus, who drove to the airport with 2 suitcases and a passport that did not hold his real name. Slow for me, who sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wood grain while time moved like syrup. News broke within hours. Screens flashed his photo. Words like alleged and investigation and long-running schemes scrolled by like a chorus. The phone rang and rang. I let the machine take most of it. The church called and offered prayer. Neighbors texted and offered pie and silence. I accepted both. Shanice came to the house after nightfall. She stood in the doorway like she wanted to apologize for everything that had ever gone wrong. I held out my arms. We did not speak for a long time. We cried without hiding it. When you run out of tears, something else enters the room. It is not joy. It is not even hope. It is the thin edge of possibility. The trial ate the better part of a year. Courtrooms have their own weather. Fluorescent light that makes every face look tired. Air conditioning that hums like doubt. Wooden benches that do not care whether you are a victim or a spectator. The jury looked like Atlanta on a bus on Monday morning. Black, white, brown, older, younger. A few with the posture of people who already carry too much. The DA laid the fraud out first. Charts and emails and witnesses with quivering hands. Retirees whose nest eggs had been cracked and poured onto someone else's pancakes. A veteran with a steady voice that cracked only once when he said his wife had stopped sleeping. Numbers built their own scaffolding until anyone could see the shape of the theft. Then came the murder. The toxicologist spoke in careful phrases, translating chemical whispers into human speech. The medical examiner walked the jury through what a heart looks like when it stops because a poison told it to. A technician explained how the emails had been recovered after someone thought they had been deleted. And then Jerome Patterson took the stand, the partner whose spine had softened under the weight of time he did not want to serve. He looked at the floor more than he looked at the jury. He said Marcus had asked for a solution that would look like life choosing to end. He said he refused to administer it, but provided instructions and contacts. He said he was sorry. The word landed like a feather, where a brick should have fallen. Shanice testified last among the family. She wore a navy dress without decoration and flat shoes because standing in truth does not require heels. Her voice shook at the beginning, but then it found its home. She told them about the tea in the jar. She told them about handing it to her father with her own hands. She told them how she had wanted so badly to believe she was helping that she had ignored the wrong notes in the song. The defense tried to make her doubt herself on cross-examination. They tried to rename her courage as confusion. She did not let them. When she stepped down, I could breathe again. The verdict came back faster than the sun crosses a lawn in July. Guilty on fraud, guilty on extortion, guilty on murder. Life without the possibility of parole for the last. I did not cheer. No one in my row did. Justice does not taste like celebration when it arrives carrying the body of the man you loved. It tastes like clean water after a long thirst that left your tongue cracked. In the weeks after sentencing, I slept for 2 nights in a row for the first time in a year. On the 3rd night, I woke at 2 a.m. and went to the enclosed porch where Thomas's orchids stood in their strange quiet. A new bloom had opened on the smallest plant, an improbable blue that looked like it had stolen its color from the sky and kept it for itself. I touched the air an inch from the petals and thought about how beauty takes its time and arrives on its own schedule with no apology for how long it made you wait. Healing did not come as a straight line. It was a path with switchbacks and hidden roots waiting to catch a foot. Some mornings, I stood in the kitchen and felt this house as a sanctuary. Other mornings, it felt like a museum of haunted objects. I kept moving through both kinds of days. I made a choice that Thomas had left for me in a video I had not been able to watch until now. He appeared on the screen with eyes that were tired and bright at once. He spoke directly to me about the money and about what money is for. He never told me what I should do. He asked me who I wanted to become. So I set up a victim compensation fund in his name and mine. I sat with Mr. Feldman and a board of people who understood how to move money without losing integrity. We built rules that said dignity first and speed second and paperwork never more than necessary. $2 million went into accounts that felt like bridges instead of walls. The first woman we helped was 81, with hands that shook and eyes that did not. She had lost her retirement to a lie told with a straight face. When we wrote the check, she did not cry. She stood up straighter and said, "I am going to buy groceries without counting this month." That sentence felt like the gospel to me. At home, Shanice and the children moved in for a season that became a year that became a new kind of family. We shared chores and long quiets. She found a job at a nonprofit that helps the defrauded find their footing again. She started night classes because she wanted to learn the language of trauma and how to lead others out of it without losing herself. The children grew the way children do when adults finally stop lying to them. They asked clear questions and accepted clear answers without needing every detail. They drew pictures of our house with too many windows, and I told them truth lives behind glass where light can find it. I went back to painting with a fury that produced storms on canvas. Then the storms cleared and new images came. A woman at a crossroads holding seeds, a porch light left on for someone who finally came home, a door with a scratch across it, and a hand reaching out to sand it smooth. I opened a small gallery on a side street where the rent would not make us beg. I called it Second Bloom because names matter, and I had learned that blooming twice is not a miracle, but a discipline. We gave wall space to women midway through their reinventions. Widows, divorcees, caregivers who had spent years holding other people's lives and needed a place to set their own down and pick them back up. People came, not in crowds at first, in ones and twos. They stood in front of a painting until something in their face softened. They wrote notes in the book on the front table that said things like, "I thought I was alone. I thought healing would feel like fireworks. It feels like washing dishes without crying. Thank you." On Saturday afternoons, we brewed coffee and let anyone sit and talk. We lit candles for losses without making speeches about them. We learned each other's names without demanding each other's histories. On the anniversary of Thomas's death, I closed the gallery early and went home to cook the meal he always asked for on days that meant something. Fried catfish with lemon, collard greens with just enough heat to make you know you were alive, cornbread in a cast-iron skillet that holds stories in its seasoning. Shanice set the table. The children put the forks on the wrong side, and we left them that way because not correcting can be its own kind of grace. We ate and laughed and let silence visit without scaring it away. After the dishes, I took the urn down from the shelf where it rests beside a small stack of journals I have filled since he left. I touched the smooth ceramic like a cheek and said, "We are all right. Not always, not easily, but we are all right." Later that night, alone in the study, I opened my journal and wrote to myself, not to him. "Dear Loretta, you carried fire through a house full of dry timber and did not let it burn what could be saved. You were not perfect. You were enough. You were angry, and you did not let anger be your only name. You were afraid, and you did not let fear be your only prayer. You told the truth, even when it took your breath away to say it. Keep doing that. Keep making beauty that does not lie about the cost of beauty. Keep your door locked to danger and open to the good that knocks without demanding." Months folded into a new year. The city changed clothes again. Oak leaves browned and fell and then grew small and bright. One afternoon, a girl from the high school down the road wandered into the gallery and stood in front of the crossroads painting for a long time. She had a backpack with a broken zipper and a tiredness around her mouth that did not belong to her age. "Is that you?" she asked, nodding toward the woman holding seeds. "It was," I said. "Now it is anyone who has had to choose the hard path to end up somewhere true." She nodded like she understood. "I think I am there," she said. "At the choosing part." I handed her a small card with our next free workshop date and my name written on the back and said, "You are not choosing alone." She put it in her pocket like it was heavier than cardstock. Sometimes love still ambushed me. I would see a man in a blue shirt leaning over a cart in the grocery store, and my heart would leap because it thought it recognized Thomas's shoulders. I would hear a laugh in a crowd that jumped an octave the way his did when something unexpected tickled him. And for a blink, I was back in a church parking lot on a Sunday in June, and there he was, with his hand in mine, and the sun laying a blessing on our backs. Grief and love share a body and a heartbeat and a door. You cannot evict one without watching the other pack too. I decided to keep the house open for both and to give them each a room. On a spring morning, the gallery hosted an event for victims of financial crimes and the advocates who refused to let fraud be the last line in someone's story. I stood near the back and watched my daughter speak into a microphone with a steady voice. She did not tell our story for spectacle. She told it because silence is the soil where shame grows, and shame has strangled enough, thank you. She talked about warning signs and boundaries, and why kindness without discernment is a gift to wolves. When she finished, the room stood and clapped, not because she was dramatic, but because she was clear. Pride rose in me like a tide that did not want to recede. Afterward, we walked home together, and the air smelled like rain, even though the sky tried to pretend otherwise. "Mama," she said, "I used to hate the word survivor. It sounded like the bare minimum. Now I think it is the doorway to everything else. First you survive, then you write the rest." I squeezed her hand. "Your father would say amen to that, and then pretend he did not cry when you said it." She laughed, and the sound settled something in me that had been loose too long. In the evening, I took a cutting from one of Thomas's orchids and set it in a small pot with new bark. You cannot force a bloom. You can make the conditions right and wait. That is the work. That is the promise. That is the life I chose after the breaking. To set conditions for beauty with my money and my time and my love, and let other people bloom how they were always meant to bloom without my hand on their stem. If you are still here with me, listening to this old woman from Atlanta tell you how she walked through a house on fire without letting it take her name, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not the worst thing that happened to you. You are not the person who lied to you. You are not the sum of the money you have or do not have. You are who you become when the door scratches and the knock comes, and the voice on the other side uses your name like a weapon. You are who you decide to be in that moment and the moments after. You are the hands that carry truth even when it burns. You are the voice that says no when no is an act of love. You are the feet that walk into offices with fluorescent lights and tell strangers what you have seen, because justice needs witnesses who will not flinch. I am Loretta Mae Washington. I am 66 now, widow, mother, grandmother, artist, keeper of a gallery that smells like coffee and new paint and sometimes like tears when stories crack open. I am the woman my husband believed I could be when he built a crucible he hoped would never be used. I am not grateful for the pain, but I am grateful for the strength it woke up in me. I am not glad for the loss, but I am glad for the love that keeps finding me anyway, in blue flowers and in children's laughter and in my daughter's steady voice at a lectern. If this story held a mirror to any part of your life, sit with it a minute. Ask yourself what seeds you are holding and where you might plant them. And if my journey gave you a step you can stand on, subscribe and stay. There are more stories coming, not because pain is endless, but because courage is. And if you know someone standing at their own back door, staring at a fresh scratch in the wood, send this to them. Tell them to lock the door. Tell them to call the truth. Tell them to wait for morning. It comes. It always comes.